In response to an article I recently wrote about why the intellectual dark web, or IDW, fell apart, someone raised the point that defining themselves as dark was perhaps a big problem. After all, movements for truth have historically tried to seek the light instead. This really got me thinking. I think the problem here is that society has over time increasingly moved towards celebrating the negative, and this is a real problem, as I will explain. Looking historically, this was first started by some on the left in order to tear down the stable status quo they didn't like. For example, back in the mid-20th century, when The Power of Positive Thinking was a bestseller, Herbert Marcuse tried to champion negative thinking instead. I think this negativity came from the well-known phenomenon of left melancholy, itself a product of left's repeated defeats and inability to face up to objective reality. Later on, the right, as usual, copied this negative mode of politics, simply because it works to deliver supporters, at least in the short term. They first successfully turned liberal into a negative word back in the 1980s, but the recent flaming of moral panics and populist outrage is really on another level. The strategy of both sides means that what was once bad is now cool, and what was traditionally good was now uncool. As I've said before, I believe the negativity of anti-woke politics in general has been a major reason for its inability to stay rational and constructive. This, of course, also applies to the trajectory of the IDW. Although the IDW started out not as negative, I think it was influenced by a particular strand of the SJW's online culture, and the idea that it was something dark was instrumental in attracting this kind of negative energy. I think this just shows why a project dedicated to rational discussion and exploration of ideas should not think of itself as dark. I get that IDW was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but still we should associate the pursuit of objective truth with the light rather than darkness, or rather with positivity rather than negativity. The way we frame it is important, because it is important for us to be mindful of being constructive rather than destructive. Being constructive versus destructive is an important difference in practice. In an age where the left wants to deconstruct basically everything, and the right wants to destroy SJWs, we all know what destructive politics looks like. Its basic impulse is to destroy your opponent, or something you don't like, at all costs, usually without concern for any collateral damage. I would argue that right now, negative politics has become such an overwhelming norm that many of us have forgotten that there could be a more positive way to approach things. Instead of setting out to destroy things, we can set out to improve things. We can put out ideas and participate in debates in good faith, with the aim of improving things, rather than destroying things. This is not to say that we can't be critical of ideas we disagree with. In fact, one needs to be critical of negativity in order to uphold positivity. This is why I'm so critical of both left-wing wokeness and right-wing reactionary populism. However, there is a very real difference between being rationally critical and being destructively negative. Starting from a positive, constructive position would prevent us from falling into the kind of destructive negativity that is currently plaguing the left and the right alike. In summary, the positive approach to politics looks like this. Think of something to improve people's lives, rather than to destroy or deconstruct. Participate in discourse with the aim of being constructive, or bring something good to the table, rather than to own or troll your opponents. Think of society as a series of puzzles to be solved, to improve things over time, rather than a zero-sum battle between tribalist political forces. Finally, don't forget to practice love and compassion while doing all this.